Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for coming by. I really appreciate it. Hello, I am Lewis Porter Jr. and today we're going to talk about something that popped up recently that I thought was interesting to talk about. It involves several, points of access that I've been talking about during the last week, I guess. So it's about role-playing games, it's about writing, it's even involves a person of color. So I want to talk about it from a purely publishing standpoint and a creative standpoint. Today we're going to talk about the fallout with the writer from Candlekeep Mysteries and what that means for creatives. So let's start off by telling you what Candlekeep is. So a new product that just came out recently, let me get my notes together, from WotC D&D was a group of adventures for Candlekeep Mysteries, and one of them just happened to be written by an individual by the name of Graeme Barber. I hope I pronounced your name right, Graeme. Please forgive me if I'm not. He's also better known as POC Gamer. He is a blog which has the title of Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Gaming from a Colored Perspective. So we can go and figure this person would most likely be a person of color. So that's very easy. And he's did some writing recently for Wizards on this project. And he did two blog posts that I found that were just fascinating to read. The first one's called, well, it's really a two-part. It's called What Happened, ? Writing for Wizards Part 1. And what he does, which I think is incredibly valuable, is he breaks down the process of what it's like to work for Wizards in 11 steps. 11 steps. And it's kind of, if you don't know anything about publishing, you've never done publishing, and you're like, I don't understand publishing, this is a great article to look at. Because while this is probably, I say, the more detailed and expansive way that most large companies do, smaller companies will use several of the steps in here also. But this will give you a better understanding of that. And I gotta admit, I'm really thankful you put that up. I feel like, oh, this is very interesting. This is kind of smart. And it's very, very helpful. And also, if you're a small company and you've always wanted to do adventures and see how the big guys do it, this gives you some great insight for that. He goes on and talks about all of that. And first and foremost, I have to also admit, I found out about this because of Eric Tenkar's blog he put out yesterday, the day before, talking about this whole fallout. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, wait, what's going on? And I read that and I started reading back. I'm like, holy cow. So I just found it very interesting. So I wanted to give props to everyone involved because that's what you should do when you're talking about something like this. So he came out, he gave a detailed information of what happened, and that was interesting. What made it even more interesting was the second part. The second part, he talks about his experience directly working with WotC. And it looks like he had written, well, let me read it to you. In the beginning, it was fairly straightforward. Based on the stages of my previous post, I signed the paperwork, provided information, and received my package. I was assigned to create an adventure scaled for levels 5 to 10, with a maximum word count of 8,000 words. My pitch was accepted after some minor modifications at the direction of my supervisor on the project. During the drafting process, my supervisor was immensely helpful in getting my adventure to spec, helping me with its writing tips and direction when needed. See, that's what you want. You kind of really want that. From a smaller guy perspective, that's probably very, very helpful. I know personally for Lewis Porter Jr. Design, we give a lot of flexibility to the writers we deal with. So personally, I tell them this is kind of what I want and let them go. Because I think it's better to let people be as creative as possible. Now, when you run a major corporation, you've got to put more restraints in because people can do crazier things. And so I understand. And it is interesting to me how this sounds like very much what I do, but at the same time, it's very different. What had happened here is Mr. Barber submitted this information, but apparently he went in and added some cool, I'd say, add-ons to the history of certain, we'll use the word monsters. In this, the Frogman, I'm going to say this wrong because I'm horrible at pronunciation if you did not know. The Ripley, he added some cool history to them. And also, where was the other part? Because I want to get this right. He added some more kind of interesting ideas for some more of the monsters in the setting, and I'm trying to look for it right now. I'm trying to get the right one. And to me, it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And Well, let me talk about what he added to the Ripley. Since he wrote it, I'll read a little bit, and then we'll talk about it. That seems to be a little more fair. So here's the other part of the paragraph. I want to read this so you guys have good context. This process saw the Ripley as a play erase dropped and some other modifications done. My full draft play erase information included was 7,187 words, and the submitted final draft was 6,969 words. I received an email that informed me that my adventure had made the cut to move on to playtesting after initial review, and that asked permission for the editors to be able to cut out the middleman and contact me directly if they had any questions or whatnot. I answered yes, and that was it. I was paid, and with that, stages 1 through 5 were complete from the first article. It looks like, he submitted it, they made some comeback, they made some information. The next paragraph. Several months later, I was contacted and informed that my adventure had been selected for publication. Several months after that, I was contacted about providing a headshot, bio, and some other information for Dragon Plus and the upcoming promotional effort. I sent it in, and at this point, please realize there had been no communication about the state of my adventure to me. I had been laboring under the no news is good news mindset and assumed that because no editor had contacted me in the intervening time, that everything was fine. So based on that, I answered Dragons Plus questions and conducted interviews about it with media, podcasts, and alike. As a result, all those are wildly inaccurate. As the release day was approaching, I was contacted by Wizards again about getting my mailing address so they could send me copies. And then he goes into the release and discovery. And I'm not going to read that because it's a long thing. I've given you enough information. But he tells you what he wrote and what actually happened. And one of the more interesting things is I found out that my adventure had been reduced down to 5,686 words, with a lot of my content significantly changed. The plot was about 80% missing, and problematic colonialist language and imagery have been inserted. So, he also got on Twitter and talked about this and put it online and give you some feedback. So, I want to talk about a little bit of this because it's important. This is what we're talking about. But I really want to talk about what happens once your product gets turned over to an editor or the company itself. So, being a guy running a publishing company, I know very specifically the problems that will happen when you get material in. Sometimes writers have visions of what they think they should be writing, what should be involved, what should be. But what happens sometimes, and this is the true statement, you have to cut that stuff down for a lot of different reasons. The most common reasons, and I know Wizards probably most likely, Wizards has to kind of keep a status quo of what fantasy is. They really can't go on the extreme and do really extreme different interpretations of what they've done before. It's kind of sad that a lot of businesses do this, and it's really it's kind of heartbreaking that they have to do this. But it is kind of necessary because such a large group of people are playing your game, you kind of have to keep it very, very middle of the road. That's one reason that I became a publisher. I hate that stuff, personally. 100% hate it. I like to do things that are really creative and very, very niche-y. But let's be honest, I also cut down my audience when I do that. WotC has to appeal to the greatest audience always. So things can't be really very, very, super duper cutting edge and very ooh, that was really risque. That's not really what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to provide the most fun possible at the safest, quote unquote, level possible. So while it looks like Mr. Baker had some great ideas, I'm sure WotC was like, "Ooh, we can't do that. We can't do that." So they changed it, and that happens sometimes. I've done it a couple times in my company. I think I have a pretty decent relationship with all the people I've worked with, writers and artists, so they have a lot of direct feedback with me, and I try to tell them why I'm doing things that I'm doing, and give them some insight. So I've never had something like this seem to happen, but it looks like, they changed a lot of his stuff. It's tough. It's one of those things that's tough because I understand where he's coming from. No one wants to see their work changed so radically after they put so much hard work in it. But at the same time, it's tough because, gotta, you gotta, you kind of have to. I mean, this is going to sound bad when I say this, but it's kind of like mayonnaise. WotC provides mayonnaise, and they don't want any kind of like spicy or any kind of thing. They want mayonnaise. That plain, basic feeling. It might be, high quality mayonnaise, but they still want mayonnaise. And if you're over here making mayonnaise with a little dash of hot sauce and some curry, you add it to it, they're like, no, just mayonnaise. Just mayonnaise. So, it's one of those moments of it hurts. And I feel as from a creative standpoint, it does. And you put all this work into it and stuff like that, and you found out it doesn't always work that way. And it's kind of like a little earth-shattering. The closest thing I had to this feeling is when I was much younger and I wanted to work for Marvel Comics, and I kept thinking these great stories I was going to tell, and they were going to be amazing, and then I realized after years of reading comic books like TV shows, like most creative endeavors that have very long histories and deal with a lot of money, can't make radical changes. They really can't. They have to stay with the status quo. And the longer the IP, we'll just say IP because that's really what it is. The longer the IP is, the more restrictive people become because you have to be. And the funny part is that that's when people get upset. Superman, Mickey Mouse, Captain America, they all fit within a very specific parameter, and you have to deal with that accordingly. It can be a little restrictive, and everybody's not for it. And look, I understand. I'm a creative person. I want people to be creative. But when you play with other people's IP, there are restrictions that you have to deal with. It's kind of sad because, like I said, knowing behind the scenes how the sausage is made, this happens a lot. This happens so often it's not even a thing. And it's one of those moments of, I feel bad. I feel bad. Because it probably sounds like he did a really cool thing. But WotC couldn't use it. So, with that all said, this is what I would say to Mr. Barber if I were you. I would take all the information that you did for that adventure and I would release it on DM's Guild. And I know a lot of you are freaking out saying, Lewis, you just told him to release it on DM's Guild. And yeah. Because of nature, what it is, what's going on, DM's Guild is the best place for it. What I would do is I would release it under the kind of mindset of Marvel Comics What If line. And you play it like that. And you're like, what if, for, this adventure you wrote. I mean, the adventure you wrote is solid. This could be the what if to that adventure. Tell people, as a supplement to it. Like, hey, you played that adventure, here's the real adventure. Here's how it really went. And then you release it through them, if you're able to. I don't know if you can. I don't know. I don't know if the rules are about they might have written that you may not be able to release that. But even if he could, or the stuff they didn't use, or if he has an option to, I would find a way to get that out there. I think that people would enjoy it, number one. Well, it's really two ones. Number two, I think people, having read this article now, knowing about what happened, are be even more interested. And, Mr. Barber did himself like a grand favor by writing this and getting it out there and having people pick it up and talk about it. That's what I think. These are just my opinions. You don't have to do that, but that's what I would do. I think this is a great opportunity for you to generate income based on an idea that you've already put out there. I know some other companies have done a variation of this over at Paizo. A lot of their adventure paths are written by, freelancers involved with Were Cabbages, and Legendary Games knew a lot of them very personally and asked these guys to do add-ons to the adventure paths they wrote. While the adventure paths are very solid and built like that, they got the actual writers to write supplements for it for Legendary Games. So if you're a fan of the adventure path, here's Legendary Games over here saying, hey, here's the writer who wrote it, here's some stuff they may have cut out or they didn't use, or some stuff they they were planning to do, but they couldn't do. Here's what we're going to do it and create it and put it over here. I think this would be a great opportunity to do something like that. I think that Mr. Barber could do that very well and build a fan base, or even better, build a whole line of those kind of products, the what if products. That's my feeling. I hope that this doesn't discourage Mr. Barber from doing work in the future. Hey, if you want to reach out and talk to me, I'm always interested in talking to new people about wanting to do work, and I'm always interested in people who want to just talk about cool stuff. So if you feel like you want to reach out to me, please feel free. I hope that people will tell them to come talk to me. I would love to do that. That's just fun. But like I said, I'm sad, but this is what happens. This is a business, and sometimes this happens, and it's never the thing you want to have happen, but it does. So here we are. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching my channel and watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later. Hey, thank you for checking out my channel. Do me a favor, check out my other videos, and if you like what you see, subscribe.